as possible. And after several days of actual combat, they'd become capable of resolving cases on their own without his intervention. Ryu was relieved as he looked at his squad members, and he said to himself, "This should be enough to conclude the training." Then he said to them, "You've worked hard this week. With this, both theoretical and practical training are complete. Now I can leave with confidence." One inquired, "Leave? What do you mean?" Ryu replied, "You think I'd always be here to cover your backs? I'm quite busy myself." In fact, Ryu had informed the Ministry, Infrastructure, and Transport a week ago that he'd be leasing a flight to Nigeria. Currently, he was just waiting for the flight path approval, and he'd even prepared passports under the name Lost Yak. Then Ryu asked, "Would there be problems catching criminal players without me?" No one spoke up. Though they didn't say it, the squad members had grown fond of him over the week. It was true they trusted, followed, and respected him as their squad leader, and the thought of such a leader leaving left them feeling empty and bitter. Ryu said, "Don't be too sad. I'll drop by from time to check on how you're doing." With that, Ryu left some parting words for each member, and he said, "Ko Nam Choel. You've completely fixed your dialect in just a week. Anyone would think you're a native of Seoul now." Ko Nam Chul smiled and said, "You flatter me, squad leader." Ryu added, "Hwang Man Ki, your recent performance has been impressive. Don't forget I always have high expectations." He said, "Thank you." Then Ryu said, "Kang Si-hyuk, you've always been doing well. Just keep it up, eh? Are your eyes welling up? You're not crying because I'm leaving, are you?" He said, No, of course not." Despite his words, Kang Si-hyuk turned away, dabbing his tears with his palm. Ryu added, "You've all worked hard. Stick to the shifts I've arranged, 3 teams, 2 shifts each. It's tough to do such a job 24/7. Contact me anytime if there's a problem." They said, "Yes, squad leader, thank you for your hard work." Then Ryu turned away with a smile hidden behind his mask. After Ryu returned home, he grabbed his phone and started reading articles and comments. This month marks the debut of the newly established Anti-Player Squad, CPF, showing unexpected success. Newly established CPF squad has dealt with 52 players in just a week, easing the burden on police officers. Is it the CPF effect? Crime rates have dropped 32% compared to last week. Have you heard of the CPF squad? The newly established anti-player squad. The squad leader is famous among players, right? Ranked number 1, nicknamed Black Scythe. Black Scythe? Is that the person who saved Congressman Lee Sung-hyun before? Then he got in with the congressman's backing, LOL. Backed by the congressman? The decision for the squad lies with the chief of police. Heard that Congressman Lee Sung-hyun actually recommended him. There's an article about it. No need to discuss his abilities. He's already proven himself by saving someone, so they must have recruited him as a special case. Ryu put down his phone after reading the comments, and he said, "The general reaction to CPF is positive. It's showing notable effects, so maybe that's to be expected," and he smiled contentedly. But his own reputation as Black Scythe hadn't improved much. Naturally, no matter how active a unit is, it's seen as merely fulfilling its duty. Unless something big happens, the squad leader's name won't make headlines. That's why he's heading to Nigeria, to make something big happen. Ryu added, "What if Black Scythe captures a public enemy? My reputation would skyrocket, at least more than now. And if I then asked Seo Arin, who was gaining popularity, for promotion, the squad's recognition and status would undoubtedly increase, and that would significantly reduce the frequency of criminal players acting out." Ryu said, "It seems I'll need Seo Arin's help." Then Ryu dialed Seo Arin using Lost Yak's phone, even taking the meticulous step of morphing his face for voice modulation. But she's not picking up? Perhaps because it was an unknown number, she didn't answer. After several attempts with the same result, he decided to send a text. "Seo Arin, it's Black Scythe. I have something to discuss, so call me back when you see this." Not even 10 seconds passed before Seo Arin called back, and she inquired, "Are you really Black Scythe?" Ryu replied, "Yes, it's me. You'll recognize my voice." Seo Arin remembered the voice of Black Scythe she met in reality. Wearing a mask had made him even more memorable. And she said, "Ah, yes, it's really you, Black Scythe. But how did you get my number?" "I never gave it to you." Ryu said, "I have my ways." She said, "Ah, right. "You're the CPF squad leader?" Ryu said. "Looks like you've seen the news." She said, "Of course. I wouldn't miss an article with your name in it." "Oh, don't misunderstand. It's just a habit of surfing the internet and I happened to come across it." Ryu said, "I'm not misunderstanding." Then she asked, "Then why did you call?" Ryu replied, "I was thinking of making a public service announcement to get our squad known, and you'd be the perfect model for it." She inquired, "Me? A model?" SEO Aaron was flustered, but only for a moment, and she added, "I'll do it. I want to." She accepted so readily it was surprising. Ryu inquired, "You're deciding this easily? Don't you want to think it over?" She said, "What's there to think about? If it's something that can help you, Black Scythe, I shouldn't even question it." Ryu said, "Then it's decided you'll be the model." In fact, Ryu had been worried she might refuse, but her enthusiastic acceptance was a relief, and he added, "I'll contact you once the schedule is set." CO Aaron said, "Thank you for giving me this opportunity." He said, "Opportunity? I should be the one thanking you." Then she asked, "If you're grateful, may I ask for a favor?" "Ah, is it too presumptuous?" Ryu blinked at the sudden request, and he inquired, "A favor? What is it?" She said, "Could we have a meal?" Ryu said, "Having a meal with a mask on, that might be difficult." She said, "Oh, right, the mask." In fact, even transformed into Lost Yak, he couldn't reveal his face to CO Aaron. Ryu added, "And I have to go somewhere for a while, so I won't have the time." She asked, "Is that so? Where to?" Ryu said, "I'd rather not say." She said, "Oh, I'm sorry." CO Aaron, who had seemed so cool-headed at the barbecue, was now flustered, a stark contrast to before. Then Ryu said, "Then I'll contact you again when the advertisement schedule is ready." CO Aaron said, "Yes, I understand." Black Scythe. After ending the call, Ryu smirked and said, "I've secured a model for the promotion, and CPF is running well without me." Then he asked himself, "How's Player Place doing?" With that thought, he called Yamti. She said with her excited voice, "Master, what's up?" Ryu inquired. "Are you at home?" She replied, "Yes, at home." "Are you thinking of coming over?" Ryu said coldly. "Cut the nonsense. How's the management of Player Place going? Everything okay?" She said, "Yes. I've given detailed instructions to the chairman, so we're smoothly accepting new members." Ryu inquired. "All the new members passed the personality test, right?" Yamti replied, "Right. Thanks to you handling the 1,000 members last month, we've cleared out the mud and replaced it with fresh water." Ryu said, "That's good to hear." In fact, after Ryu and Heavenly Demon's efforts, Player Place had been completely cleansed of its garbage. Then he said, "Now tell the chairman, make sure you manage the cafe members well so that you can move them at any time with just a word." She said, "Don't worry, I've already given the instructions." He inquired, "And the flight? No issues with booking?" Yamti replied, "Of course. I've booked the flight to Nigeria as you requested last week. We've received approval from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport and the airports. In fact, the flight Ryu was planning to take was prepared by Player Place's chairman, Song Jae-kyum, and despite being overshadowed by Heavenly Demon, he was also a prominent Chibol, and as the eldest son of the LC group, owning a private jet was within expectations. Then Ryu asked, "So I can leave tomorrow as planned?" Yamti said, "Yes. But why are you going to Nigeria?" Ryu said, "That's not something to discuss over the phone. I'll tell you in person tomorrow." She laughed and said, "A trip alone with Master. I've been longing for this moment. I can't believe how happy I am." Ryu said, "Don't exaggerate it. Just make sure your luggage and passport are ready. We're leaving tomorrow morning." She said, "Understood, Master." After hanging up, Ryu shook his head and said, "Maybe I should have just told her over the phone." He hoped she hadn't misunderstood anything. Now that round 9 has ended, there are about 650,000 players left worldwide, and according to the calculations that 1 in 5 people is trash, there are still 130,000 trash out there in the world. Ryu said, "It means that just because we've dealt with the trash of Player Place, the world hasn't become a safer place. And to exterminate such vermins and to recruit an alchemist, I'm heading to Nigeria. In Nigeria, there is an alchemist of a unique class, and if Ryu can turn him into an ally, it would be of great help in breaking through round 20. Ryu added, "It's not just about acquiring an alchemist, as there are runes to be gained in the real world, and going there would fulfill the conditions, and it could raise the brand value of Black Scythe. Then Ryu, having packed his carrier bag, stood up from his seat. With a quick knock, the door burst open, and his younger brother looked at Ryu's luggage with surprised eyes. And he inquired, Are you leaving already? Ryu replied, Yeah, I'll be back soon. Ryu-wan had heard about the sudden trip the night before, but he hadn't expected him to leave so early in the morning, and he asked, Are you really going to Japan? Ryu replied, Yeah, I've been so tired lately, I'm going to take a week-long hot spring trip. A person who's been a shut-in all of his life suddenly going on a trip. Naturally, Ryu-wan couldn't help but suspect his brother, and he inquired, Hyung, do you have a girlfriend? If it's something like that, just tell me. There's nothing wrong with going on a trip as a couple. Ryu said, What are you talking about? I'm just going to relax. He inquired, Really? Ryu replied, Yeah. He said, Then take me with you. Ryu Min slowly shook his head, and he said, It's hard enough keeping one life safe. It could be dangerous if you come along. He inquired, Are you really going alone? Ryu replied, Yes. Ryu-wan could not ask any more questions. If his brother says so, he has to believe it. Then Ryu said, I'm sorry, but I'll be back. Stay well at home until I return. Make sure to eat well. He said, Don't worry. Delivery food is pretty good these days. Ryu said, If you're running low on allowance, tell me now. He said, No need. Just come back safely. Ryu said, All right, take care. I'm off. Ryu-wan watched his brother, who was pulling his carrier, leave with envious eyes. Then Ryu-wan's expression turned gloomy as he watched the door close without taking his eyes off, and he murmured softly, I want to go on a hot spring trip too. But he understood that it's still a dangerous world for ordinary people. Didn't the recent barbecue restaurant incident prove it? And he said to himself, Can't help it. Hyung is right. He might be envious of his brother who can go on trips and even to hot springs, but he didn't feel it was unfair. After all, his brother had fed him while juggling school and being the head of the household. And he added, If it wasn't for Hyung, I wouldn't be living in such a luxurious house. Just 9 months ago, it was a burden even to order a bowl of jjajangmyeon while living in a shabby one-room apartment. Then Ryu-wan smacked his head, reflecting on himself, and smacked his lips, and said, Now that I think about it, I want some jjajangmyeon. I should order it for lunch. Jjajangmyeon never gets boring, no matter how much I eat. Upon reaching the parking lot, Yamti was waiting in front of the Lamborghini, and she inquired, Have you arrived? Blah, no, Mr. Ryu-min. Ryu said, You're here? Let's go right away. On the way to Incheon Airport, as they entered the highway, Ryu broke the silence. And he said, You asked yesterday why we are going to Nigeria. She said, Yes. Ryu said, Nigeria is rife with various crimes. The public enemy, KF, is also stationed there. Yamti inquired, KF. Are you referring to that terrorist group? Ryu replied. That's right. Among those kidnapped by them, there's an alchemist I want to make into an ally. My goal is to rescue that alchemist. Ryu openly shared his objective, as Yamti is essentially a slave who absolutely obeys his words, so there was no reason to keep it a secret, and she would keep the secret even if it meant death. Then Yamti said, So you're taking me with you to use the rune of charm on the alchemist? Ryu said, No. While it's true I'm taking you because of the rune of charm, I won't use it on the alchemist. If possible, I should leave that slot open. She inquired, What about after that? Ryu replied, We have to exterminate the trash and build up the reputation of Black Scythe. That's why I also took on the title of CPF's commander. In fact, if the commander of CPF goes to Nigeria and smashes the public enemy organization, it was obvious that the name Black Scythe would become famous. Yamti said, So that's why you needed the police chief's endorsement? To leave a record of Black Scythe's departure. Ryu said, That's right. In fact, Nigeria is a dangerous country, as mentioned. It's classified as a Level 3 travel advisory due to its poor public safety. Naturally, they don't let you in for simple tourism purposes, unless there's business or another purpose. But if you can prove you're strong enough to protect yourself, entry and exit are possible. That's why Ryu moved after obtaining the title of CPF's commander, to easily pass through immigration, and to leave a record of Black Scythe's visit to Nigeria. Yamti inquired, Then who would guarantee for Black Scythe? Ryu said, I've already arranged with the police chief. Thus, Ryu wasn't worried about the departure inspection. Yamti said, It sounds like a tough journey. Ryu said, If you find this tough, it won't do. Upon arrival at the airport, Ryu transformed his appearance. As he transformed into Lost Yak, Yamti's eyes widened in surprise, and she said, "Wow, you even got taller? It's my first time seeing you transform, Master." Ryu said coldly, "Forget the admiration. Call me Black Scythe from now on." She said, "Yes, Black Scythe." In fact, Ryu boarded Player Place's chairman's private flight for one reason, to save time with a direct flight. And he said, "Usually you can only go to Nigeria with a transfer, which takes about 25 hours on average. And rather than wasting so much time in the sky, it was better to take a private flight for a quicker journey." Shortly after, the two boarded the flight without any wait, and there were only two passengers, Ryu and Yamti. At that moment, the captain's voice came over the speaker. "Welcome, I'm Captain Seo Tai Siok. Our flight will go directly to Lagos, Nigeria's largest city, at Murtala International Airport, and it will take a total of 17 hours. I hope you have a comfortable and pleasant flight." Ryu laid down in the first-class seat, comfortably stretching his legs, and said, "Yamti, try to get some sleep. There won't be time to rest once we arrive." Yamti said, "Okay, I will." Then Ryu Min closed his eyes, organizing the tasks to be done in Nigeria in his mind, and sleep gradually enveloped him. After 17 hours, Ryu's group arrived at Murtala International Airport and went through immigration. Just by looking at their age, it was obvious they were players, so they passed without any problems. After retrieving their luggage, Ryu recalled the captain's advice as they disembarked from the flight. "I don't know the purpose of your visit to Nigeria, but please be careful. Especially, you must absolutely not take airport taxis. There are countless tourists who were threatened and robbed after boarding one without knowing. Well, you look young, so I doubt there will be scammers targeting players, but it's still better to be cautious." Then Yamti asked, "Master, where shall we go now?" Ryu replied, "First, let's disguise ourselves. Wait here." Then Ryu entered the airport bathroom. When he came out, his face was completely changed. He became a perfect 40-something man, and he said, "This way they won't know we're players." Yamti inquired, "What about me?" Ryu said, "You look fine as you are." Yamti had already applied makeup to look older. Ryu said, "To foreign eyes, you'll appear at least in your 30s. She said, "That's mean." Ignoring Yamti's grumbling, Ryu looked around for a taxi. Despite being obviously tourists, there were taxi drivers hawking from everywhere. But Ryu Min didn't just hop into any. He read the taxi drivers' minds before moving on to find another. And he said, "Finally, found it." The taxi driver, with a bright face, asked, "Speaking English, I see you're tourists. Where to?" Ryu replied, "To Ibadan, please." He said, "Okay, it'll take 2 hours." As the taxi driver drove, he occasionally glanced at them through the rearview mirror. And when their eyes met, he smiled warmly and started a conversation in English. And he inquired, "You're Asian, right? Which country are you from? China?" Ryu replied, "No, Korea." He asked, "What brings you to Nigeria?" Ryu said, "Business-related." He inquired, "What company do you work for?" Ryu said, "Just a company that sells cleaning products. A small company." The man said, "Well, our country does need cleaning." After an exchange of trivial conversation, 2 hours passed. Yamti asked Ryu with a nervous face, "When will we arrive?" Ryu replied, "We're almost there." But even after 3 hours, the car continued to move. And the taxi driver, knowing this, started a conversation without being asked. And he said, "Sorry, there was heavy traffic, so I took a detour and it took longer. I'll speed up as much as I can." However, it was ultimately after 2 more hours that the car stopped. And he said, "We've arrived." It took 5 hours to reach the destination, or so they thought. Looking outside, they saw a decrepit village. It was a different place from their intended destination. Ryu asked, "Is this Ibadan?" The driver said, "Just get out." Before Ryu could argue about not receiving the taxi fare, the driver had already gotten out. Following him, Ryu saw the taxi driver making contact with an armed thug. The driver said to the man, "Got them here." The man inquired, "2 people?" He said, "Yeah, 1 man, 1 woman. Isn't it perfect?" The man inquired, "No backstabbing, right?" The driver replied, "Do I look like I'm doing this for the first time? Just pay up. I'm going out to eat." Driving for 5 hours made me hungry. Counting the money and then smiling slyly at them, the taxi driver's behavior gave Yamti the chills. Though she didn't understand the English conversation, she wasn't foolish enough not to realize that she had been sold to a human trafficking ring. The armed thug, flicking the gun's barrel, said, "You understand English, right? Both of you, come here." Unless you want to die, what are you hesitating for? You fuckers. Haven't you grasped the situation yet? At that moment, Ryu changed his appearance to Lost Yak's appearance. Also, he used the mask. Then Ryu smirked and said, "It seems you're the one who hasn't grasped the situation." The thug's eyes changed. His thoughts were clear. He was panicking, seeing that. The taxi driver was equally surprised. It might seem like they were captured, but they had allowed themselves to be captured, and it didn't take long for the man with the rifle to realize this fact. At that moment, the taxi driver's head burst open like a smashed watermelon. After retrieving his scythe, Ryu warned the armed thug, "Come closer, unless you want to die." Bako, a member of the human trafficking organization, was taken aback, and he said to himself, "I didn't even see the attack coming." His gaze shifted slightly downwards. The taxi driver, who had been regularly dealing with the organization, had turned into a corpse in an instant, and the man asked himself, "A scythe? Was he killed by that scythe?" How the scythe extended was not important. What mattered was the speed at which it happened, too fast for him to react. Even though he was holding an automatic rifle, Bako became tense. Speed surpassing superhumans, weapons beyond common sense, a masked man. All things considered, it was clear that these were the rumored players. The man said to himself, "A player? To think I would face a player in my lifetime, damn it." Then he asked, What are you? Are you from the police?" Bako spoke thoughtlessly, then corrected himself internally. "No, that can't be. We have all the local police in our pocket. Besides, that guy is Asian, right?" Then Bako aimed his rifle again without taking his eyes off his opponent. Though the opponent was said to be a player, there was no need to be afraid with the invincible automatic rifle in hand. If necessary, he could just shoot. And even if he's a player, he's just a human in the end. And he asked, "Who are you? Which organization are you from?" Ryu replied, "If I told you, would you understand? Just come over here quietly." Bako was about to say, "Would you come if you were me?" But he swallowed the words that reached his throat, and he said to himself, there was no need to provoke the player unnecessarily. Ryu said, "Not coming? If you won't, I will." As Ryu took a step forward, Bako made up his mind. Regardless of the opponent's identity, he decided to just kill him. And he shouted, "Die, motherfucker!" Before pulling the trigger, Bako had pictured it in his mind. Soon, the opponent would be riddled with bullets and bleed to death. After all, even a player is human in the end, and no human can survive against bullets. However, something unexpected happened, and he inquired, He's unharmed?" Despite aiming accurately and shooting, the opponent stood there unharmed, blinking as if he had seen a ghost. Bako fired again. This time he could clearly see it, the man dodging bullets by moving swiftly. He inquired, Dodging all those bullets?" In the span of 2 seconds, 13 bullets were fired, yet not a single one hit the target. Seeing was believing, yet it was unbelievable. Ryu sneered at the surprised opponent and said, "Trusting only in your gun, huh? No chance." With the runes of balance and slaughter, Ryu Min's agility was at 1,176, and even against an automatic rifle which was faster than a pistol, dodging was not difficult, especially with the rune of foresight. With a sneer, Ryu took another step forward. The man shouted, Don't come any closer, you monster!" And another round of bullets was fired, but before long the magazine was empty, used up more quickly than the trigger could be pulled. As he tried to replace the magazine from the ammo belt with trembling hands, he saw the opponent had come right up to him. Bako, startled by the proximity, backed away. Ryu said, "Out of bullets, I see." Bako stumbled backward and fell on his bottom. Ryu didn't do anything. He just watched as the guy trembled in fear, and he called Yamti. Yamti, who had been hiding behind, peeked out her head and said, "Yes, master." Ryu said, "Dominate this guy, then order him to lead us to the organization's boss." After Yamti took dominate the man, Ryu returned to his previous appearance. As Bako walked, his colleagues armed with automatic rifles ran up to him. One inquired, "Bako, there you were?" We heard gunfire suddenly. What happened? To their question, Bako shrugged as if it was nothing, and he said, "The humans we caught for trafficking fought back, just sprayed the floor with bullets to scare them a bit." One inquired, "By the humans you caught, do you mean those behind you?" Bako glanced back. Behind him were Ryu Min and Yamti, and he said, "Yeah, that's right." Even though Mbako acknowledged it, his colleagues couldn't shake off their doubts. Who keeps the people they kidnapped right behind them? What if they were ambushed or ran away? More crucially, their expressions, devoid of fear despite being kidnapped, were telling. One inquired, "Are those two the ones you kidnapped?" "Really?" Mbako replied. "That's what I said." He said, "But that's odd." The colleagues couldn't finish their sentences, as Ryu's scythe mercilessly cut off their heads. Looking at the heads falling in the order they were cut, Ryu said coldly, "Keep going to where your boss is." In a dank basement where not even sunlight could reach, Subina, an ordinary woman in her 30s, cried within the bars, as she remembered what the boss, who seemed to be in charge, said when she first arrived. "Your face and body are totally my type. Hey guys, don't touch this one. Once I'm done with my business, I'll start with her." Being favored by the boss for her looks was why she hadn't been harmed yet. Subina hugged her knees, burying her head, and said to herself, "I definitely heard it. He said he would rape me." She thought of suicide many times, but the associated pain was too terrifying. Yet considering the pain she would endure, suicide seemed right. At that moment, footsteps echoed in the quiet basement, not giving her time to think. Fast, as if determined, she said to herself, it's here. It must be the boss." However, what reached her ears was an unfamiliar female voice. It was Yamti, and she was saying, "Oh, there's someone here too?" With her eyes closed in fear, Subina opened them slightly at the foreign language. Breaking the padlock on the cell with a dagger, Subina realized the strength beyond that of an ordinary person. And this woman was a player. And she asked herself, "But why break the lock?" Yamti said, "Come out, hurry up." As Yamti gestured, Subina, looking puzzled, stepped out and she inquired, Where are you taking me?" Yamti said, "What do you mean? Just follow me." Emerging from the dank basement into the open air, the two made their way outside the building. Although Subina was still on guard, her expression softened a bit upon seeing the faces of the people gathered under the light. They were the women she had seen kidnapped and brought here, and she inquired, "What are you all doing here?" But Subina's words trailed off as she noticed something at their feet, startling her. It was a human corpse. The smell of blood rising up made her nauseous, but that feeling disappeared strangely fast when she saw the face of the organization's boss among the corpses. Not only his corpse was there. Looking up, she saw numerous corpses, presumably of organization members, strewn about, and she asked herself, How did this happen? At that moment, a suspicious man wearing a white mask approached the Asian woman, and he inquired, "Yamti, have you released all the kidnapped people?" Yamti replied, "Yes. I've thoroughly searched with presence detection, and these are all the people here." Then Ryu looked at the people gathered. They were all women, exactly 12 in number, who had been confined in cages arranged throughout the building, and he greeted them in English, attracting their attention. Since English was commonly used even in Nigeria, there was no one who didn't understand him. However, possibly due to the mask he wore, they all looked at him with wary eyes. Ryu said, "There's no need to be so guarded. As you can see, we are players who have come to rescue you. I think most of you have confirmed this, haven't you?" Ryu pointed to the ground, and the women nodded. The men who had been brutalizing and sneering at them had turned into mere lumps of meat. He had deliberately not used his skill to erase the traces to show the women. Ryu added, "As you can see, the boss of this organization has been killed. All 21 members present here have been killed as well. The immediate threat is gone, so you can rest easy. In a sense, you are free now. You can go home," one inquired. Is that true?" "We're really free," Ryu replied. "These are the car keys I took from the organization members. Those who can drive can take them and go home. Here you go." The women said happily, "Oh my, thank goodness, it's really over. We can finally go home." Ryu was aware of the painful days these women must have endured in this place, having heard from the organization's boss about their atrocities. And he said to himself, anyway, this organization is just a human trafficking ring, not KF. In fact, Ryu, who had earned a high reputation by targeting KF in a previous regression, didn't exactly know where the KF base was. The organization changed locations frequently, and he hadn't felt the need to remember it. And he said to himself, After all, if you start from the bottom and work your way up, you'll eventually find KF. Then Ryu said to the women, there are too many cars to take, so just take two. There's a risk of being tracked, so ditch the car after driving away. The women expressed their gratitude to Ryu, weeping, and said, thank you so much. Thank you for saving us. Subina, who was also among the women thanking him, then asked something that seemed crucial. But may I know the name of our savior? Waiting for this question, Ryu smiled behind his mask and replied, Black Scythe. Just remember that, she said. Black Scythe. I will remember it forever. I'll never forget this. Ryu had no qualms about revealing his nickname. Even the story of rescuing women from a human trafficking organization would contribute to the legend of the Black Scythe. That's also why he wore the mask. Then Ryu said, please go now. It's getting late. Subina asked, aren't you leaving, Mr. Black Scythe? Ryu replied, I have some things to take care of here. Please go ahead. She said, oh, then we'll be going ahead. We won't forget this kindness. Then Ryu used his skill to erase the traces of the many corpses. And he asked Yamti, did you get his phone? Yamti replied, yes, here it is. Taking the deceased boss's phone, Ryu sent a text in English. 3 women, 1 man, 20% discount for a quick sale. Contact me. He sent the message to a contact listed as a trading partner in the organization's phone. Soon after, a reply came. Okay, coming now. Ryu smiled, lifting the corners of his mouth, and said, they took the bait. Shall we prepare to welcome our guests? Montai, a member of the organization, was always in his best mood when it was time to receive the goods. There was the anticipation of meeting new faces daily, but above all, he relished the fact that he could be the first to assault them. And he said, this is why I can't quit this organization work. It's just so suited to me, you know? Sade, his subordinate, who came as an assistant, asked with a smile, are you planning to pick one today as well? He said, of course. When have you ever seen me rest? Sade inquired. Did they say it was 3 women and 1 man? He said, yeah. We'll tie up the man tight and choose among the women. I go first, obviously, Sade said. Of course. When have I ever not given way to you? He smiled and said, right. Thanks, you bastard. With sly smiles, the 2 armed with automatic rifles entered the domain of the human traffickers. Then Sade inquired, huh? Where is everyone? No one's coming out to greet their guests. And, not a single gatekeeper in sight, huh? Montai said. Maybe they went to the restroom? They thought little of it and continued walking when suddenly they spotted someone standing in the middle of the area. It was a masked man. Before they could even ask, who the hell is that guy? Ryu summoned his scythe. The 2 immediately aimed their rifles at him, on high alert, and one said, that bastard is a player. Sade said, damn, no wonder it was so quiet. Did they get taken out by him? It could only mean that the trafficking group had been taken out by him. Then Montai shouted, kill him! At that moment, the sound of gunfire tore through the air as their rifles spat flames. Ryu, who didn't even have a chance to react, was showered in bullets and fell with a thud. Sade inquired, damn, what's happening? Did we get him? Just then, a voice came from behind them. Ryu said, what's the point of wasting bullets like this? Startled, they turned around only to see the man they had just unloaded bullets into standing there like a ghost, and an East Asian woman staring at them. Then Yamti used her skill and dominate the men. Ryu inquired, are they controlled? Yamti replied, yes, master. Ryu said, good. It was worth attracting their attention. Then Ryu, signaling with his eyes, had Yamti ask the traffickers, spill everything about what your organization does. Montai said, the men are harvested for organs which are then sold, and the remaining carcasses are used as meat. Women are repeatedly raped by 8 members of the organization, forcibly impregnated, and then the babies are sold off. Yamti shouted, stop! That's enough! At Yamti's command, the traffickers shut their mouths. Ryu asked, why stop? She said, I can't listen anymore. Ryu gave her a moment to calm down before ordering, let's use these guys to get into the organization first. Yamti said, yes, I'm sorry for interrupting you, master. Ryu said, it's okay. I understand. She said, thank you. I'm lucky to have met such a generous master. I'll serve you for life. Ryu believed that climbing up these organizations would eventually lead him to KF. After all, these were offshoots derived from KF. On the other hand, after treating the wound with an emergency care skill, Victor Zaffiel looked at his patient, a typically armed organization member. As a player, Victor could have killed the man and attempted to escape, but the aftermath is the problem. As a medic, Victor couldn't bear to abandon young children and escape on his own. In fact, KF isn't just made up of regular people, and there are as many players among them as there are civilians. Just within this area, there are 30 players standing guard. This was why Victor had not attempted to escape. The man asked, "Hey, Victor, lost in thought?" Victor said, "No, not really." Seeing Victor zoned out, one could assume life had been too comfortable for him lately. And the man said, "Have we been too forgiving with you lately? Treating you like some sort of doctor? Do you look down on us now?" Victor hastily denied, swallowing his true feelings of contempt, and said, "No, not at all." He had no choice but to endure. The man said, "You should behave yourself, doctor. Even without you, any player could now receive emergency treatment. Then you might wonder why keep you alive. Any guesses?" Victor said, "Well, I'm not sure." The man said, "It's because of the bond we've shared." Victor almost burst out laughing, and he said to himself, "Bond? What a joke. These monsters." During his year-long imprisonment by KF, Victor knew full well the atrocities these people committed against their captives. He said to himself, "A bond, they say, as if. They're keeping me alive for my abilities." They knew his class was an alchemist. It wasn't something he revealed willingly, but he had to use a healing potion to save a dying woman. That's when they found out. Since then, they incessantly prodded about his runes, skills, and abilities, forcing him daily to concoct potions. But what they did with those potions, he didn't know. Victor added, "Luckily, I lied that I could only make one potion a day, and that it was random, or else the market would be flooded with potions." So, the claim about their bond was nonsense, and the only reason they hadn't killed him was that he was an alchemist. "As you don't slaughter the goose that lays golden eggs, do you?" Then the man said, "Just make sure to watch your back. You don't want to end up dead." Victor said, "Yes, I'll keep that in mind." Suddenly, a bell rang out in the courtyard, signaling the assembly of the kidnapped individuals. Victor started walking. By the time he reached the gathering place, many were already there. 10 children, 15 adults, and the rest, 50 members of KF, and Victor was the only player among the kidnapped adults, and he said to himself, "Escape is impossible." Darren, the leader of KF, scanned the crowd with his piercing eyes, eventually fixing his gaze on Victor, and said, "Victor." He said, "Yes?" Darren inquired, "You've worked hard deceiving me all this time, haven't you?" Victor inwardly flinched but tried his best to appear confused, and he said, "What? I don't understand what you're saying." Darren said, "The potions you make, they're not random, are they, right? And the cooldown is shorter than 24 hours. Silence is often seen as approval, and to deceive someone, you need to say something." But Victor was too flustered to remember that, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been truthful." Darren said, "You thought you were the only alchemist in the world? There are other alchemists. We learned of their existence during the distribution process of the potions. After interrogating one, we discovered you've been lying to us." "You got caught, huh? Your silence speaks volumes." Victor inwardly cursed and said to himself, "Why hadn't I considered the possibility of other alchemists? I was too arrogant thinking I could get away with lies." But what Victor didn't know was that everything was a test to see if he was lying, and he only realized this after he had unwittingly confessed. As he said, "I'm sorry," the boss and the members burst into laughter, reveling in Victor's plight. He had foolishly fallen for a simple trick. Darren said, "Thought you were smart being a doctor and all, but turns out you're just a fool. Ha! To think you'd fall for such an elementary ruse. Ha!" Then Darren suddenly stopped laughing, and the atmosphere turned serious as the members followed suit, and said, "Victor, you dared to deceive me? Ha! Must have been fun, right? Laughing at the foolish boss who fell for your lies? Ha! Fine. I admit it, I was a fool, but you see." Then his sinister gaze shifted towards the children, and he said, "I don't take deception lightly." At his signal, a member grabbed Ricky, a child. Victor said, Why are you doing this? Let go." Darren said, "That kid seems quite fond of you, huh?" As Darren sneered, Victor felt a wave of anxiety, and in that brief moment, he regretted not attempting to escape with just the two of them. Darren inquired, "Why befriend a kid? What is this? A daycare?" Victor said, "Please, I beg you, I lied and I'm sorry." He said, "Oh, I'm not doing this just to receive an apology." Then a dagger appeared in Darren's hand. As a level 40 assassin player, he positioned himself to throw the dagger, and he added, "I'm seeking compensation for your deceit. The kid's death will be on you." The dagger was released from its master's hand in a flash, leaving no chance for intervention. Victor, despite being a player, had no means to save Ricky from 20 meters away. He thought it was impossible to save him until someone deflected the dagger and appeared. In the blink of an eye, as Darren's face registered shock, someone had materialized in front of Ricky, a person adorned with a white mask, holding a scythe in hand. Darren, the leader of KF, blinked several times. He wondered if he was seeing a ghost, and he said to himself, "Where the hell did this guy come from? He didn't even trigger my perception." And considering his sudden appearance, it seemed like he had used the skill invisibility, but he wasn't detected by perception skills. Then he shouted, "You! What the hell are you doing?" Before Darren could finish shouting, he shut his mouth, as without warning, Ryu had cut the throat of an organization member who had grabbed the child named Riki. The deed was done cleanly, without a drop of blood being spared, and then he even had the leisure to hand the child over to Victor. In contrast, Darren couldn't afford such leisure. He was so tense that sweat beads formed on his forehead, and it was only later that he noticed the man was wielding a scythe, and he said to himself, "A player who uses a scythe as a weapon." There was one figure who came to mind almost synonymously. Black Scythe. His nationality is unknown, but always topping the global rankings. And among players worldwide, he was known as a monster. Darren said to himself, could it be that Black Scythe? No, just because the nickname in the class is Reaper, and he's known to wield a scythe, doesn't guarantee it's him. Darren hadn't seen it himself, and whether Black Scythe used a scythe wasn't certain. It was merely speculation, and he said to himself, no. But that movement, it was extraordinary, not the skills of an ordinary player. He wanted to check again, and the dagger, flying at almost bullet speed, was aimed directly at the child's head. However, the white mask's scythe blocked the dagger once again. This time, Darren clearly saw it, and he said to himself, it wasn't a coincidence, predicting the trajectory of the flying dagger and accurately blocking it with the scythe. He had suspected, but this was no ordinary fighter. Then he said to himself, blocking my attack twice. You're no ordinary guy, huh? But no matter where you came from, you've chosen the wrong opponent. And it seems he woke up today and decided to play the role of the hero of justice. But reality is different. Darren smiled and said to himself, at my command, all his subordinates here would turn the hostages into sieves with their gunfire. How could he block a hail of bullets alone? Let's see if you can protect the children. With a devilish smile, he was about to command his subordinates. But Darren's eyebrows twitched. The opponent vanished conspicuously. Darren asked himself, what? Didn't he use invisibility just now? There should be a cooldown, but he used it again. Moreover, the astounding part was that using invisibility made him disappear from perception. Darren said, impressive, but that doesn't mean I can't give the command. But Darren couldn't even continue his thought, and a tremendous force from behind crashed his face into the ground. Then, the white mask, who had appeared behind him, tightened his grip on Darren's neck. Darren wanted to issue a command, but was unable to. But his subordinates wouldn't just stand by and watch their boss be subdued, and one shouted, that bastard! Save the boss! But the man subduing their boss was smiling under the mask. Victor couldn't close his mouth, and he inquired, how did this happen? He's taking on so many by himself. It was too one-sided to be considered a fight. The players were being sliced apart like moths to a flame. 30 of them were no match for the overwhelming power of this masked guy. This spectacle was observed by everyone present, their faces frozen in horror, except for Victor. And he said, let's run! Victor, who had been frantically worried about the children getting hurt, had no choice but to seek help from others as they kept hesitating. And he said, Marcus, what are you standing there for? Hurry up and get the kids to safety. But their movement might have caught the attention of the ordinary members of the organization, and aiming their guns at them was the next logical step. And one shouted, where do you think you're running off to? Come here if you don't want to be turned into a beehive, you slaves! A sigh escaped Victor's lips. He had wanted to evacuate the children quietly, but it had all gone wrong. But suddenly, gunfire rang out, and the shouting member collapsed. Not just one, but dozens of members were shot down like reeds. It appeared that 3 of the organization's members had turned on their own, firing at them. Victor inquired, "What's going on? Why are they betraying each other all of a sudden?" Victor, puzzled by the friendly fire, almost fainted at the sudden appearance of a woman. A woman of East Asian descent said, "Now's the time. Hurry up and get these kids to safety." But Victor couldn't understand her words. However, he could grasp the meaning through her gestures, and he said to himself, "Ah, she's telling us to run away quickly." Victor nodded at the woman, expressed his thanks, and led the people away. Blood was sprayed everywhere at the scene. Darren, having witnessed this hell, decided to make a run for it first, and he said to himself, "Fuck, it's over. I'm no match for that guy. It's the Black Scythe. That guy really is the Black Scythe." Fittingly for his class as a Reaper, he was slaughtering 30 players without batting an eye. He added, "Today really is a shitty day. Damn it all. Oh, heaven, why are you testing me like this?" After running non-stop, Darren ducked behind a building wall and took out his phone. After quickly sending a message, he peeked out again. But one person appeared in his perception. It was obviously the Reaper, that guy. And he said, "Motherfucker. Damn it, maybe I won't be detected if I use invisibility." He vanished and started running. But soon his neck was grabbed from behind, and his head smashed into the building wall, and his invisibility was dispelled. Ryu asked, "Trying to run away?" Darren, with his ankle crushed under Ryu's foot, couldn't even think of retaliating against the overwhelming force. Then Ryu said, "Come with me, unless you want to die." Ryu took the semi-conscious man to Yumti, and he said, "Yumti, control this guy. We need to lure out the other one like we've done so far." Yumti, "Yes, master." Then Ryu looked towards Victor, who was with the children in a safe place, and he said to himself, "Victor Zapil, the alchemist, you hear my new fish." While breaking through numerous organizations to reach him had taken only 2 days. Fulfilling the mission to rescue him, there was still work to be done, as Ryu was aware that this man under Yumti's control was not the real leader of KF. Ryu smirked behind his mask and said, "He's merely a mid-boss. It's time to draw out the real one." In fact, Odeon, the current supreme leader of KF, was desperate for the organization's revival. Currently, about 800 players operate under the name KF in Nigeria. But a few more months, and there might be none left. That was the biggest drawback of players. This was also why Odeon, a non-player, disdained them, and he said, "They're like expendable goods with a shelf life, and they aren't even strong enough to dodge bullets. Useless players." He scoffed, but the one thing he acknowledged was the potions made by the alchemist Victor. And he added, "Potions are helpful. They can be sold on the black market and hoarded for the future." For now, he was hoarding them, selling only a little on the player place market when funds were low. Of course, non-players couldn't use potions, but if a player ingested it on their behalf, they worked. Suddenly, Odeon received a text message on his phone. "Darren, emergency. We're being attacked by someone presumed to be the Black Scythe." He inquired, "Black Scythe?" Even Odeon, not a player, had heard of the Black Scythe. As his subordinates had praised him highly, he inquired, "A level 89 player who never lost the #1 ranking? What if we could recruit this guy to KF?" Odeon's eyes narrowed into crescent moons, and he said, "Finally, a useful player." On the other hand, Victor doubted his own eyes, as Darren was shivering underfoot, a wreck of his former self, but Victor felt no sympathy for him. Then the savior in the white mask spoke in English. His voice sounded male, but his nationality was unclear. Victor thanked him first and foremost, and said, "Thank you so much. Because of you, Ricky and the kids are safe. Ricky, say thank you." Ricky said, "Thank you, thank you." Seeing Ricky shyly express his gratitude, Ryu said to himself, "This child, seeing him for the first time, he must have been destined to die otherwise." Then Victor, representing everyone, asked a question they were all curious about. "Masked sir, may I ask your name?" Ryu didn't answer. Victor said, "Ah, I understand it must be difficult to reveal. That must be why you wear the mask. But please consider our position. It would be a lifelong regret not to know the name of our savior. If it's too difficult, could you at least tell us your nickname?" Ryu said, "Black Scythe. That's my nickname." Others might not know, but Victor immediately recognized the name, and he inquired, "Are you really the Black Scythe?" Ryu said, "Do I look like someone who lies?" Victor said, "It's not that. It's just so unbelievable to think a celebrity known to all players was right in front of him, and that celebrity had saved his life. It was natural for Victor to be incredulous. Then Victor said, "To meet the top-ranked Black Scythe, it's an honor. My name is Victor Zafil. I'm a player and a level 40 alchemist." Ryu responded nonchalantly, though he already knew all about him, and said, "Is that so?" Victor asked another question. "But what did you mean earlier, about not killing him yet?" Ryu replied, "It means he's still of use. We need to lure out the leader of KF through this guy." He inquired, "The leader?" In fact, Victor, having been captured by KF for a year, did not know who the real leader was. Then Victor inquired, "How do you plan to do that?" Ryu replied, "I'm thinking of sending a message with a picture of this guy. Now that it's mentioned, let's throw the bait right away." Ryu took a picture of the battered Darren and found the KF leader's contact to send a text. He knew who the leader was from previous regressions. Seeing the message that Darren sent, Ryu was pleased with how things were turning out, and he sent a text along with the picture. "Darren, the guy has lost. If you want him alive, come here now." Victor tilted his head upon reading the message, and he inquired, "This person is the KF leader?" Ryu said, "That's right." He inquired, "But sending this, would he really come? Wouldn't he rather not come?" Ryu said, "He will respond, definitely. He might even find it interesting." In fact, Ryu had managed to draw out leader Odeon in a similar manner in previous regressions. Then a text came flying in. "Odeon, wait there." Victor was surprised to see the text, and he said, "Wow, he really did respond." But his expression soon turned worried, and he inquired, "You're not planning to wage a war against KF, are you?" Ryu replied, "Now that we've started, we must uproot all members of KF." He inquired, "Isn't that too dangerous?" Ryu smiled and said, "For me or them?" Victor chuckled at Ryu's confidence, and he said, "I was worried for nothing." Then Ryu asked, "Victor, what will you do now?" At Ryu's question, Victor spoke softly, "I have to return to Lagos. It has been a whole year since I've seen my family." Ryu nodded and waved his hand towards the outside, as if he was ready to let go without any regrets, and said, "Hurry on then. Leave this place to me." Of course, Ryu, having read his mind, knew Victor wouldn't leave. As expected, Victor had already made up his mind, and said, "I'll stay and watch." "I need to see the end of the demons that tormented me," Ryu asked. "What about the others? Do you all feel the same as Victor?" At Ryu's question, people hesitated before nodding, and said, "To be honest, we don't want to stay here even for a moment, but if Victor is staying, we will too. We'll stay to see what becomes of KF." Ryu appreciated their resolve and courage, but he shook his head quietly. Considering the upcoming battle, they would only be a burden. And he said, "Victor might be okay since he's a player, but you are all civilians. Just a graze from a bullet could send you to death's door, and you want to stay in KF's stronghold? It's too dangerous, so please leave immediately. You'll hear about the results on the news." They couldn't argue with that. And truth be told, they didn't want to stay in such a dangerous place, especially with the KF leader expected to come. They wanted to run down the hill as fast as possible, only hesitating because of their loyalty to Victor. Realizing this, Victor smiled and said, "Black Scythe is right. You shouldn't be here. It's too dangerous. Before KF arrives, please return to your homes now. Don't you have to take care of the kids here too?" One said, If you put it that way, okay. "Victor, thank you for healing and protecting us all this time." Victor said, "It's nothing really." Marcus said, "Not at all. We could endure because you were here." Victor said, "Thank you for saying that." "Ah, Mr. Marcus, you live in Lagos, right? Could you take care of the kids with you too? It's just until I return. Many have lost their parents and have nowhere to go." He said, "Don't worry about that. I'll take responsibility for sending the kids to their parents. Those without parents, I'll take care of them." Victor said, "Thank you, Mr. Marcus. There are many cars down there. You can take any to leave." Marcus said, "Got it. Let's meet again alive. We'll find out what happens to KF through the news. I hope for a good outcome." Ricky, who had been glancing back frequently, finally couldn't hold back and ran to hug Victor and said, "Uncle, we'll meet again, right?" Victor said, "Kid, of course. Wait at Mr. Marcus's house. I'll come to find you as soon as this is over." Ricky said, "Okay, you must come." He said, "Ricky, I hope you go back safely." Then Victor turned to look at Ryu and Yamti and inquired, "Do we stand a chance?" Ryu replied confidently, "Of course," but Victor couldn't shake off his anxiety, as the KF leader wouldn't appear unarmed after all. and he said, "My profession is an alchemist." Victor suddenly took out various potion bottles from his inventory and offered them to Ryu, and said, "Take these. They will help in the fight." Ryu said, "Thank you, but I'll decline. There's no need for such measures." Victor said, "But having a bit more power." Ryu said, "Trust me, if I thought we'd be overwhelmed by KF, I wouldn't have started this." Seeing Ryu so adamant, Victor had no choice but to put the potions back. Night fell, and dawn broke with stars twinkling, but still the KF leader did not appear. And Victor asked himself, did they manage to escape safely? As Victor, tired from waiting, thought of the people who had left, feeling a tap on his shoulder, he turned around. Ryu said, "They're here." Regaining his senses, he heard the sound of numerous vehicle engines. Looking out from the building, he saw people disembarking from dozens of trucks. Ryu activated the scanning skill and observed the increasing number of red dots, and he said, "They've gathered quite a number." Victor inquired, "How many people are there?" Ryu replied there were over 300 members entering the base. Ryu signaled Yamti with a nod and said, "Take shelter in the building with Victor. Leave Darren outside." She said, "Yes, Black Scythe." After some time, Ryu was surrounded by organization members. Seeing that, Victor, "This is bad. There are too many." Victor hadn't expected so many to appear and looked to the side with a pale face and said, "Will Black Scythe be okay? There are too many. I don't know what they're saying. This is frustrating. Maybe I should learn English or something." Nearly the entire force seemed to have been mobilized, with countless members surrounding Ryu Min. Among them, a man stepped forward and inquired, "Are you Black Scythe?" Ryu, wearing a white mask, spoke confidently. "Yes, it's me." The man said, "So you're Black Scythe?" Ryu said, "Yes." The man said, "Pleased to meet you. I am the leader of KF, Odeon." Ryu inquired, "Is that so?" Then the man said, "Now, since you called me here, release Darren." Ryu said, "But you didn't come alone?" The man asked, "When did I say I would come alone?" Ryu said, "I thought you would come alone since I have your subordinate." The man smiled and said, "You think I'd sacrifice myself for a mere subordinate? Are you scared seeing these troops?" Ryu smirked and said, "Scared by these guys? Hardly." Of course, Ryu had expected them to gather up like this. Then Ryu said, "You must be scared the one, not me. Fake Odeon." At those words, the opponent's shoulders flinched momentarily. Though he didn't show it, it was clear. He was internally panicked and confused, naturally because this guy was pretending to be Odeon, so he wasn't the real one. Ryu added, "If you're going to deceive, pick your targets better. Did you think I called you here without knowing your face? Did you think that if you bring a bunch of underlings and a stand-in, I'd just go along with it?" The man said, "What nonsense." Ryu said, "Stop hiding behind them and come out. I'll listen to what you have to say." The man shouted, "Are you insane? I am the leader of KF." That's when another man walked out from among the crowd and said, "Enough. Stop acting." Seeing him, Ryu's expression changed, as this man was the true leader of KF. The real Odeon. Odeon also was curious. How could he know his face when they hadn't even met, let alone had any information about each other? And he inquired, "How did you know my face? I made sure that not even Darren, let alone anyone else, could take a picture of me." He was very curious and patient, but the answer he got was ridiculously simple. As Ryu said, "Just because I just can." The response would have made the younger him start shooting, but Odeon had patience, and he said, "You're trying to provoke me, but it's useless. I'm not so inexperienced that—" Ryu interrupted his words and said coldly, "Cut the crap and say what you want to say. I'll give you the chance to speak." Though it was insolent, he still held back. After all, he was the leader of KF. He wasn't someone to be easily fooled by the opponent's tricks. And he said, "Your audacity is impressive. To be so bold in front of so many people." Ryu inquired, "Is that all you have to say?" Odeon replied, "The truth is, I responded to your call because I have a proposal for you." Ryu said, "Let's hear it." Odeon spoke straightforwardly, not caring about the players around him, and said, "Join me. Devote yourself to KF. Then you won't need to worry about anything in life." Unlike Ryu, who had no reaction, Victor, who was hiding in a building listening to the conversation, had to cover his mouth in shock. And he said to himself, "Did I just hear that, right? He's asking him to join KF-7. In other words, Odeon was making a recruitment offer to the Black Scythe." Odeon added, "How about it? Dedicate yourself to me and we will rule the world." Ryu said, "A tiger can't follow a cat, can it?" Odeon inquired. "A tiger, huh? Do you really think you're of that caliber? Ryu replied. Well, maybe not. But one thing's for sure. The so-called leader of KF is nothing but a mouse, even less than a cat, hiding behind others and avoiding the front lines. Anyone would think that. Odeon laughed and said, I have to give you credit for your way with words. Unable to hold back any longer, Odeon frowned and asked, Do you really have no intention of joining me? Ryu replied, How many times do I have to say it? Can't you understand words? Shall I show you through actions? Ryu's scythe flashed for a moment and then decapitated Darren. Darren was sent on his way to the afterlife in an instant, and Ryu added, This is my answer, you rat. Odeon said, So you had no intention of using him as a hostage from the beginning, as if there was no more value in talking. Odeon turned his body around and said, Let's see if your skills are as good as your mouth. As he entered the crowd, the players surrounded him as if to protect him. And he said, Kill him, leave not a single piece of his flesh behind. As soon as the command was given, hundreds of players rushed towards Ryu. Seeing the members armed with weapons, Ryu smiled from behind his mask and said to himself, As expected, he only brought players. If they were ordinary members, I would have killed them without hesitation, but knowing they were players, I decided to go easy on them. After all, they were holding items. It'd be a waste to kill them. The players were lucky, as our Ryu had decided to go easy on them. Hiding in a building and watching the situation unfold, Victor clenched and unclenched his hands. His palms were sweaty, and he said to himself, Is it finally starting? I'm getting nervous. He trusted the skills of the black scythe, but anything could happen. Then he said to himself, Wait, something's odd. One thing was strange. Among the gathered members, none were carrying guns. Realizing this belatedly, Victor's eyes widened, and he inquired, Could it be that they're all players? And his skin wriggled, and he said, So many players have devoted themselves to KF? Will Black Scythe be all right against this many players? He could hear the sound of weapons clashing, but due to the angle, he couldn't see if the fight was going well. Then Victor turned his head to the woman who seemed to be an ally of the Black Scythe, and inquired, What's your name? Yamti, understanding the simple English, answered, Me? I'm Yamti. My name is Yamti. He inquired, Yamti, okay, Yamti. Do you think the Black Scythe can win? What do you think? Yamti laughed and said, What are you saying? And she added, Listen well, alchemist, sir. You might not understand, but I'll try my best. You seem anxious, but trust Black Scythe. There's nothing we can do to help. All we can do is wait here quietly for the KF leader. Hearing the word KF, Victor pressed Yamti for more information, and he inquired, What? KF. You think KF might win? Yamti replied, The Black Scythe said to wait, and he'll deliver the KF leader to us. So don't worry. If we capture the KF leader, there'll be no problem. Despite her reassuring words, Victor's expression seemed darker than before. At that time, all sorts of skills were poured towards one target. No matter how high his level is, it was thought impossible to dodge this many skills coming from all directions. That was until they saw it with their own eyes. And Odeon checked the time, surprised. 5 minutes had passed. But not only was there no corpse, he was still fighting vigorously. Odeon said, Not the top ranker for nothing, eh? Odeon had brought 800 members, 500 of whom were players. And he said players should be dealt with by players. Even if they died, it was better for the time-limited players to die than ordinary soldiers. At that time, he believed it would be enough to kill him. But now he thought differently, and he said, Even with all these forces, it's not enough. Odeon knew there was a large level gap, as most were around level 40, but he hadn't expected that hundreds couldn't even scratch one person. And he said, I intended to kill him if I couldn't have him, but that seems not so easy now. It was risky to let him live. Ryu was only defending with his scythe, not counterattacking at all. He seemed to be barely managing to block and dodge. Seeing that, Odeon said, As time passes, the tide will turn. After all, he's human, he'll get tired. But as the battle dragged on, there seemed to be no sign of improvement. It was surprising that there were no casualties yet. Odeon added, But still, it's impressive to cleanly block and evade attacks from dozens at the same time. And with such skills, he could probably dodge bullets too. Then he said, A player who could dodge bullets becoming my subordinate. If he had sworn loyalty to me, I would have immediately offered him Darren's position. What a pity. Watching the Black Scythe still fighting, Odeon suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Ryu had made eye contact with him midway. Odeon asked himself, He has the leisure to look at me. In that moment of internal surprise, sounds of flesh being torn and weapons piercing through came. Indeed, Black Scythe was stabbed like a skewer by other players and died. The victorious players shouted in jubilation, "We killed the Black Scythe!" Odin's eyes bulged, and he asked himself, was he killed in a moment of distraction? He looked at me and died like that? His surprise soon turned into a smile, and he said, "So much for being the top ranker. To die so foolishly just because he got distracted." Fortunately, the potential threat that might have been problematic in the future was gone. But suddenly, someone grabbed Odin. Pulled by a strong force, Odin was lifted into the air. He crashed through a window of a building, holding his waist and groaning. Seeing the being that appeared out of thin air, Odin's expression hardened instantly. It was none other than the Black Scythe, who he thought had died like a rat. And he said in shock, "Black Scythe!" Victor and Yamti rejoiced upon seeing Ryu, who smiled back, and he said, "Didn't I say I'd deliver him to you?" Pointing at Odin, Ryu gave the command to Yamti and said, "Subdue him." As the players laughed mockingly, watching the Black Scythe get pierced by dozens of blades and bleeding out, they celebrated, and they said, "We did it, we finally killed him. We have killed the Black Scythe." And a bloom of smiles spread across the faces of the members. But that was only for a moment. Like a mirage, the body of the Black Scythe disappeared. Unaware that it had been a decoy, they looked around, perplexed, trying to find the body. And one inquired, "What happened? Did someone accidentally use a trace erasure skill?" Another said, "If someone did, come clean now." They were all busy looking for the body when it wasn't the time to be doing so, considering they should have been looking for Odin's whereabouts instead. And since everyone was too focused on the Black Scythe, they hadn't seen Odin being whisked away. Then Odin reappeared from somewhere and asked, "What's all this commotion?" One said, "We just killed the Black Scythe, but somehow the body disappeared." Odin said, "And what of it? The disappearance of the body is not what's important. The important thing is that we killed the Black Scythe." Odin declared victory with a wide smile and said, "You have eliminated the biggest obstacle to our organization." They said, "Thank you, leader. We've taken another step towards our goal, ruling the world." Then Odin smiled benevolently and raised his hand to quiet the crowd, and said, "Now that the Black Scythe is gone, all that's left is to carry out our cause. But first, we need to redistribute the items. So everyone lay down your equipped gear and the items in your inventory on the ground. Everything, without missing a single one." They said yes. In fact, the command of the KF leader was absolute, and if he ordered death, they would die. If he ordered life, they would live. If he demanded surrender, they would surrender. And since they were collecting items for redistribution in preparation for an upcoming terror attack, it made sense. Thus, the players complied. They laid down not only their equipped gear, but also scraped everything from their inventories. Soon, the scene turned into a sea of items, and with over 500 players laying down their gear, the number easily exceeded 3,000 items. After becoming empty-handed, Odin directed the members to move to an adjacent clearing to prevent them from retrieving their items again, and said, "Those who have laid down their items, move to the side." Then he smiled and said, "Well done, now you can die." While Odin was smirking, a sound was heard from somewhere. It was a clear and piercing sound, and at the same time, a bright light enveloped the players one after another, as Ryu activated the red moon and unleashed a barrage with the moonlight slash. With each swing, 50 players turned to dust and vanished. After decimating half of the enemy forces in 5 strikes, he grasped the scythe. In fact, the absence of their equipment only made it easier, and for Ryu, they were walking targets. Victor and Yamti, witnessing the massacre unfold in real time, were speechless. They felt neither sympathy nor joy. They simply waited for the inevitable end, as if observing a natural disaster. Almost there, when Ryu was about to finish off the enemies, a welcome notification appeared before him. Player confirmed to have killed 1,000 players. You have acquired the title Slayer. At that moment, a slight smile crept up Ryu's lips behind his mask. It was the title he had been waiting for. Title, Slayer. Acquisition condition, kill 1,000 players. Effect, damage dealt to players increased by 50%. Inflicts the abnormal state, fear, on all players who witness a killing for 3 seconds. In front of him stood 50 test subjects, whom he immediately slew with the scythe. After killing one, the others froze in place like toys with depleted batteries, losing their will to fight and unable to move from fear. Ryu said the abnormal state fear was successfully applied, and the duration of fear is only 3 seconds. It seemed short, but it was significantly long enough if it kept being applied. As another fell, fear reset with each death. As Ryu continued his massacre, the rest were immobilized by fear, trembling in place. Ryu said to himself, that's why it's such an overpowered title in battles, especially against many enemies. But the downside was its applicability only to players, making it less versatile, but still better than nothing. Initially, Ryu was unaware such a title existed. It was only after noticing the actions of Heavenly Demon and Ansang Cheol that he realized something was up, as whenever those guys slaughtered players, Ryu saw them being affected by fear and realized there was something to it. Later, after destroying KF, he finally learned about the title. Ryu added, if someone saw this, they'd say, isn't it crazy to kill 1,000 players? In fact, when the countries merged and the number of players increased, Heavenly Demon and Ansang Cheol committed massacres. Indiscriminately, they killed players from other countries, all for the cursed points. Assumably, they'll obtain the Slayer title in the process. Ryu didn't mind others obtaining the title. However, he disliked the idea of anyone having the power to oppose him, and he said, being affected by fear is unpleasant. Even if affected for just 3 seconds, his high resistance would shorten it to 0.3 seconds, but I still dislike the notion. More importantly, with so many people dying, the number of survivors for future rounds would decrease. Thus, Ryu aimed to deny them the chance to obtain the title. And he said, I must be the only one to obtain the Slayer title. Having retrieved his extended scythe to its original state, Ryu Min deactivated his skills. There were no enemies left standing. Looking up, he saw heaps of bodies forming hills, and half were obliterated without a trace due to unbearable damage. Ryu grimaced as he erased the remnants, turning the bodies to ashes. With so many, even erasing them was a task. After a while, when the gruesome scene was cleared, Ryu turned his attention to the items which were scattered everywhere, relinquished by the dead, and he said, lucky the inventory has infinite capacity. All these items are mine for the taking, and all that's left is to win over the alchemist's heart. Turning his gaze, he saw Victor and Yamti emerging from a building. Victor, having witnessed the slaughter of hundreds, was initially shocked, but soon regained his composure and asked Ryu, is it all over? Ryu replied, I've dealt with the vermin here, though one remains. Then Ryu Min's gaze shifted towards Odeon. Yamti's puppet stood still as instructed, like a wooden doll. Victor inquired, how did you manage to turn the leader of KF against them? Ryu replied, it was thanks to this player, Yamti. She has the ability to control minds, turning them into puppets. Realizing such a terrifying woman was by his side, Victor momentarily felt a chill, worried he might be next. Sensing his thoughts, Ryu chuckled behind his mask, and he said, don't worry. Her ability doesn't work on players. It has many restrictions. Victor said, ah, I see. It was a lie. But Victor believed it wholeheartedly, and at that moment the only person he could trust was Ryu, the Black Scythe, his savior. And he said, thank you, Black Scythe. When you said you'd confront KF, I had my doubts, but seeing you fulfill your promise. When I was captured by KF, I had lost all hope. It's all thanks to you, Black Scythe. Ryu said, it's nothing really. Reading his mind, he could see it filled with awe and gratitude. But Victor no longer wishes to fight. Victor wanted to retire, to go back home and spend the rest of his life in peace, having let go of everything. Ryu said to himself, Victor must accompany me until the 20th round. But with such a weak mind, he won't last. It was a problem. However, Ryu already knew the solution, so he remained silent for this reason. Then Victor inquired, what will you do with this leader of KF now? Kill him? Ryu replied, we can't do that, not while KF hasn't been completely eradicated. We'll use him to the end, then kill him. We'll use him to gather the remnants and put a final end to this vermin infestation. Don't worry, KF will vanish into history. He smiled and said, ah, then that's a relief. You're very thorough in your work. Oh, Victor, who had just shown a relieved smile, suddenly opened his inventory and said, "Take this." Ryu inquired, "Isn't that the potion you were going to give me earlier?" Victor replied, "Yes. These are potions of various types I made. Please accept them as a token of my sincerity." Unable to refuse twice, Ryu accepted the potions and said, "Thank you. I'll make good use of them." Inspecting the items, he found healing potions, stat potions, resistance potions, and more. Ryu said to himself, "Is this what a level 40 alchemist can make? Not legendary, but still quite useful." Then Victor said, "It's not enough for saving my life, but if you ever need potions, please come and tell me. Oh, my address is..." After giving his address, Victor smiled warmly and said, "Don't hesitate to visit. I'll provide them for free to you, Black Scythe, both in this world and the other. Of course, that's if I survive the rounds," Ryu said. "Thank you." Victor said, "Well then, I'll be going now. I can't wait to see Ricky and the kids. And my family, too." Ryu said, "Do so. You can take one of those trucks over there." Victor said, "Thank you. Take care, Black Scythe and Yamti. I owe you a lot." As Victor got some distance, Yamti asked, "Are we just letting the alchemist go, Master?" Ryu replied, "Yes. He promised to provide me potions any time." She inquired, "So you've achieved your goal?" Ryu replied, "Not yet." And he shook his head as he watched Victor's departing figure, and added, "What I want is to have Victor with me until the 20th round. But he's not willing yet. He's tired. Having achieved his goal of seeing his family before dying, he doesn't care about what happens next." Yamti inquired, "So, what will you do now?" Ryu said, "What else? I need to change the alchemist's mind." As Ryu watched the truck drive away, he instructed Yamti and said, "Tell Odeon to lead us to the place where he's hidden the alchemist's potions." Then Ryu removed his mask and said, "Meanwhile, I'll pick up some items." Arriving at Marcus's house, Victor said, "Mr. Marcus." Marcus said, "Oh, Victor, you're safe." Ricky and the children running towards him. Victor said, "Ricky, have you been well?" He said, "You really came." Victor said, "Of course, I said I would come for you." Then Marcus asked, "But what happened next? What about KF?" Victor, sharing smiles during their reunion, explained everything to Marcus and said, "KF brought nearly 500 players, but Black Scythe took them all down. You don't have to worry anymore." Marcus, surprised by Black Scythe's power, asked Victor, "Really? He won against 500 alone?" Victor nodded. Marcus gulped helplessly and then asked again, "What will you do now?" Victor replied, "What else? I'm going home." Ricky, teary-eyed, seemed sad and said, "Aren't you leaving too soon, Uncle?" Victor said, "I have to. I came to make sure you were safe after all. And don't worry. Marcus's house and ours are close. I'll visit often while you're here. Stay well until then." Ricky said, "Okay." Smiling, Victor prepared to leave and said, "Mr. Marcus, please take care of the children until their parents are found. If you need anything, just let me know. You remember my address, right?" He said, "Yes. Don't worry. Go quickly. Your family must be worried." Victor said, "Thank you. Then I'll be going." Arriving near his house, Victor walked the rest of the way, and the familiar scenery quickened his heartbeat as he approached. Opening the front door, Victor saw his mom, his dearly missed mom. Tears flowed as mother and son embraced without a word, and she said, "You were alive. Thank goodness, truly." "I thought you were dead," Victor said. "I'm here, alive and well, Mom." She said, "Let's not stand here. Come in. Let's talk about what happened." Victor said, "Yes, but where is Sophia?" Sophia was Victor's younger sister. Her absence naturally led him to ask, but his mom's face suddenly turned awkward, and upon hearing the situation, Victor was utterly shocked. Victor wanted to tell his family everything. How he had been held captive by KF for a year, the brutal humiliations he endured, and the countless atrocities he witnessed. And he wanted to share all that he had experienced with his family without holding anything back. But he couldn't do that now, as the sister he had worried might fall behind was actually living better than he expected. Victor said to himself, "No, not just better. She's totally nailing life, isn't she?" And she was achieving district rankings with ease, something he had never managed. Then he looked up at his mom, noticing their faces brighten. And how could she not be delighted to hear about their daughter thriving in the other world? Victor said to himself, "Mom looks so happy. How can I say I was captured by KF and went through hell?" It felt like throwing ashes into already cooked rice, so he couldn't bring himself to say it. Then his mom asked him directly, "Victor, what happened to you? Why haven't we heard from you for a whole year?" As Victor debated whether to share his grim story, he finally decided that better not to spoil the mood, and he replied, I took a trip abroad. Shocked by his unexpected response, his mom exclaimed, "What? A trip? Is that true? I thought you had been kidnapped by KF and were dead." Victor laughed and said, "KF? What time do you think this is?" His mom inquired. "So you just went on a nice trip? But why didn't you call?" Victor replied, "I lost my phone." She inquired, "How can you just not contact us? We were worried." Victor bowed his head deeply and said, "I'm sorry. I had so much on my mind, wondering whether I should continue being a doctor and other concerns. I just wanted to get away. Just drop everything and leave." The mom's face immediately showed concern, and she inquired, "Depression or something?" He said, "Yes, I've been feeling quite troubled. It's embarrassing at my age, late 20s. She asked, "So you went traveling here and there?" He replied, "Yes, I just wandered wherever my feet took me. When I ran out of money, I'd get a job and start working. Once I had money again, I'd travel." Once he started, the lies flowed easily, and he said to himself, "Yes, it's better to say I traveled because of depression than to admit being kidnapped by KF. It was a white lie," hoping his family would worry less. Then his mom said, "That's good then. Have you sorted out your feelings now?" Victor said, "Yes. Now I'll never leave again. After all, there's no place like home." She said, "It's good you realize that now. And Sophia is also doing well as a player, so you should focus and do your best too." Victor replied with a bittersweet feeling, "Yes, I will." Then he asked, "By the way, where did Sophia go?" His mom replied, "She got a commercial deal and went off to shoot. And how happy she'll be to know you're back." Seeing his mom smile so broadly made Victor feel reassured about his decision. And he said, "I'll go check out my room. It's been a while." Returning to his room after a year, Victor closed the door and sighed, and said to himself, "It worked out. My sister and mom aren't suffering as much as I worried." He had wanted to see his family at least once before dying, and now his wish was fulfilled. Now there were no regrets left in his heart, and he said, "I'm sick of endless survival games. I just want to rest now. It is better to end my life surrounded by family than keep struggling to survive." And in the evening, Victor was able to reunite with his sister, who returned late at night. They hugged each other, tears welling up in their eyes. Then his sister asked, "Where have you been, brother?" "I've been looking everywhere," sweating profusely. Victor again resorted to a white lie. She said, "What an unusual excuse. You just vanished on a trip without leaving a single message." Victor said, The same complaint from you and our mom, huh?" She said, "We were worried. We thought you were surely dead, especially with all the upheavals." He said, "I thought you were gone too. Who would have thought you'd survive up to round 9? His sister said, "Brother, didn't you hear? I ranked first from round 1. Of course, just in my district. The overall district is dominated by that player called Black Scythe. If you're a player." Victor said to himself, "Did I know? I've spoken with Black Scythe, saved by his terrifying force, and seen his formidable strength up close." Then his sister inquired, "Don't you think that the player called Black Scythe is really something? I heard his level is incredibly high." He said, "Yes, impressive indeed." She added, "I heard he's a player from Korea. Have you been there?" Victor inquired. "Ha, Korea. Black Scythe is a Korean player?" She replied, "Yes. Didn't you know? It's all over the news. He's working there as the captain of a squad called CPF, catching criminal players." He said, "Oh, is that so?" Then Victor said to himself, "I didn't know, having been in a place where I couldn't even see a cell phone for a year." And a new respect emerged for Black Scythe, who continued his efforts to eliminate crime in his own country. His sister asked, "What about you? How did you survive all this time? What's your job?" He replied, "Me? I'm an alchemist." She inquired, "An alchemist? There's such a job?" As they inquired about the things they didn't know about each other, time flew by. As the happy time passed and midnight approached, Victor lay in bed, deep in thought about his future, and said to himself, "From our talk, it seems Sophia doesn't need to be worried about. She's managing fine on her own, and Ricky has been taken care of by Mr. Marcus. And the other kids are safe too. Black Scythe has wiped out all the KFS monsters tormenting me." Everything seemed to be falling into place, and there was nothing left to worry about. And he asked, "But why does my heart feel so empty? Is it because of the harsh treatment under KF? Or because my soul has worn out from watching the acts of those monsters every day?" Lost in thought, Victor stared blankly at the ceiling, so engrossed that he didn't notice the tapping at his window. Hearing the noise belatedly, Victor looked at the window and was startled, and inquired, "Black Scythe?" Following the gesture to come out, he hurried outside, and there indeed was Black Scythe standing. Victor said, "Hello, what brings you to our home? Oh, perhaps you need a potion." As Victor fumbled through his inventory, Black Scythe shook his head with his mask on and said, "No, I have something to tell you." Victor said, "Something to tell? Not about KF, I hope?" Ryu said, "Don't worry about KF. It's already taken care of. You'll hear good news through the media tomorrow." Victor said, "Oh, that's a relief. Then what is the message?" Ryu captured the mood with a serious tone and said, "Victor Zafiel, don't give up." Victor inquired, "Pardon? I didn't catch that." Ryu replied, "Don't give up on life. I know what you went through with KF. You must have endured terrible suffering, but," pausing for a moment, Ryu looked around the house and continued, "Don't you have a family to protect?" Victor said, "I don't know why you're saying this all of a sudden, but there's no problem with my family. My sister, too. They're living just fine without me. I've achieved my purpose, and now I have no regrets." Ryu said, "That's arrogant." Victor inquired, "Pardon?" Ryu said, "Achieved your purpose? Do you think life is a simple game that ends once you clear a mission? Life is a game that doesn't end until you die. Like the survival game we're playing. It doesn't end until you either complete the 20th round or die. You have to keep moving until then. And you say you're done because you met a small goal, that you have no more regrets? How lightly do you take life to say such things? Isn't that the height of arrogance?" Victor just listened silently. There was nothing incorrect about those words. Ryu added, "Don't give up on life. If you give up the survival game, what do you think will happen to the family that remains?" Victor said, "Who knows? They might live just fine without me." Ryu asked, "Do you really think your family was fine without knowing whether you were dead or alive? Don't you think they spent every day waiting anxiously at the door, wondering when you would return? They could bear it, because they had the hope and expectation that you, Victor, could return. If you die in the next round, that hope is gone. What about your family, then? Can they live normally?" Sensing it was time to conclude, Ryu drove the point home and said, "Victor, you just want to rest. After a year of hardship, you now want to rest in peace through death." The impact hit Victor like a hammer. Ryu added, "I understand, but that's not the way to look out for your family. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It's a selfish decision that only serves yourself. I hope you keep fighting until the 20th round. Your sister, Sophia, you know she's a famous ranker in Nigeria, but do you really think she can make it through 20 rounds without you?" Seeing Victor's heart waver like a leaf, Ryu believed the persuasion was nearly complete. And he said, "Protect Sophia. As an alchemist, a class specialized in support, you're unique in this world. If you're with her, she won't drop out before the 20th round. I'll help you with missions if I can. Let's call it fate. So, survive." Victor said, "Thank you for your words, but I'm not sure if someone like me can protect her." Ryu said, "You can. Let me show you this as proof." Then Ryu pulled an item from his inventory. Victor was shocked to see the item information. A legendary item, a life potion, capable of reviving dead players. Ryu said, "I obtained this item by chance. It means you can protect Sophia if you use this. It says an alchemist can make any potion, right? But, as you can see from the usage restrictions, you need to be at least level 60 to craft this potion. That means you need to reach at least level 60 to qualify to make it." It was as Ryu said. If he reached level 60, he might be able to create a life potion. Then, even if Sophia died, he could protect her. Ryu added, "If you want to protect Sophia from death, reach level 60. If you don't have a goal, find a new one. Don't give up on life like an old man who has seen everything, because you didn't." Victor's eyes lit up with a new purpose as he looked at the potion and said, "Thank you. I've been feeling confused and unclear, but now it feels like things are in order. No one but you, Black Scythe, has said such things to me. I'm truly grateful." Ryu said, "I'm glad to hear that." Then Victor inquired, "How do you understand my feelings so well?" Ryu replied, "I have a knack for understanding people. Call it insight, if you will." Insight. Such a simple word hardly seemed sufficient. And Victor said, "It felt like finding light in the darkness, like being rescued from a mire. Black Scythe is truly a remarkable person." Ryu said, "I've said what I came to say. It's heartbreaking to see someone I saved disappear without motivation." Victor said, "I'm sorry. for showing you my worst side. Don't worry anymore. I have a new goal now. Ryu said, that's good to hear. I'll trust your word. As Ryu saw Victor's mind completely change, he smiled behind his mask, and he said, before I leave, one last piece of advice. Be open and honest with your family. It will resolve any feelings of suffocation. Victor's eyes widened, and he inquired, you even knew I hadn't told my family. How exactly? Just then, Sophia suddenly appeared and asked, brother, who are you talking to at this hour? Victor turned his head and said, oh, this person is, huh? But Black Scythe had already disappeared. Sophia inquired, brother, who was it? You were just with a suspicious person wearing a mask. Pondering Sophia's question, Victor whispered softly, it was Black Scythe. Seeing Sophia's surprised face, Victor made up his mind. He would take Black Scythe's advice. On the other hand, the captain announced, our plane will arrive at Incheon Airport in 10 minutes. Ryu inquired, have we arrived? Then he glanced at his side to see Yamti's head awkwardly bent like a ghost's. She was completely knocked out, and he said to himself, no wonder she's exhausted. As during the 4 days in Nigeria, we had accomplished quite a bit. We had annihilated dozens of organizations, including a human trafficking ring, and had located and wiped out the main base of KF, and I even earned the title of Slayer. But most importantly, I managed to completely win over the alchemist on my side, without even using Yamti's charm. And the gains from Nigeria were not just here. As once it's known that the Black Scythe wiped out KF, his reputation will soar incomparably. Ryu had already set things in motion. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Everything was perfect and satisfying. Then Ryu smirked and shook Yamti in the seat next to him and said, wake up! She said, just a little longer, dude. Ryu inquired, speaking informally to your master? Are you out of your mind? Yamti was startled upon seeing Ryu and inquired, huh? Master? Ryu said, seems like your training is lacking. Yamti said, sorry, I thought I was dreaming. Ryu said, I'll let it slide this time. Yamti smiled and said, thank you, as magnanimous as the ocean, master. Then Ryu said, we're about to land. Start packing your bags. Yamti said, understood. Soon the two arrived at the airport, and Ryu said, Yamti, you did well in Nigeria. She said, you too, master. Ryu added, let's part ways here. You can manage on your own to home, right? Yamti smiled and said, it would be nice if master could drop me off. Ryu said coldly, you can do it by yourself, right? Go ahead then, Yamti said sadly. Then I'll go first. Take care, master. Ryu nodded and changed his appearance in the car in the parking lot. He reverted to his original form, Ryu Min. He then drove his Lamborghini home and opened the front door and said, I'm home. His younger brother, who had been watching TV at home, greeted him with an excited expression and said, Hyung, you're back safe. I was worried. Ryu smiled and said, of course. Who do you think I am? His younger brother said, the world is dangerous. Come to think of it, he only knows Ryu Min as the fragile prophet player. He doesn't know that his true identity is the commander of the CPF, the Black Scythe. Ryu looked at his brother with a self-deprecating smile and said to himself, advising Victor to spill his secrets while I'm hiding things from my brother. Isn't this a classic case of the pot calling the kettle black? Then Ryu inquired, was everything okay while I was gone? No problems. His brother replied, it was. I wish something had happened. It was so boring. Ryu said, even joking about that is bad. Boring is better than being in danger. That's what peace is. And he said to himself, if he had been born in crime-ridden Nigeria, such words would never come from his mouth. Well, he's still in middle school, and he's still too young to be worldly wise, so I guess it's understandable. Then his brother asked, but Hyung, did you buy anything in Japan? Like souvenirs? Ryu replied, no, and he sighed secretly and said to himself, surely my brother was still too young. After that, Ryu entered his room and said, I've snatched thousands of items from those KF bastards, including 105 unique materials. With this, I could make dozens of unique equipments and still have leftovers. It seems that the organization members hadn't sold them on the player place market and kept them to themselves instead. Even though he could start crafting right away, Ryu didn't need any unique gear, as he had already fully equipped himself with unique and even legendary grade items. And he said, I have so many unique materials but no use for them. Strictly speaking, he didn't need them himself, but his friends would go crazy over just one unique item, and he said, I should make a few and hand them out. I'll share the other gears I have too. It was almost like a charity event, but the survival of his friends was directly linked to Ryu's own survival. Then Ryu's fingers busied themselves. He was setting up an appointment with someone over text. Startled, Heavenly Demon opened his eyes wide upon Ryu's call at the rendezvous and inquired, Prophet, what is all this? Ryu replied, Unique items, Heavenly Demon said. Oh no, I see that, but why? Ryu inquired. Disappointed, Mr. Representative, surprised by Ryu's unexpected remark, Heavenly inquired, What? Ryu said, Weren't we a fate-sharing community? Especially since I know about Mr. Ma's secret hobbies. Isn't it strange to question why we would share items between us? You seem too distant. It's rather bitter, Heavenly Demon said. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. I was just wondering if there was another meaning. Don't get me wrong, Prophet. Sweating profusely, Heavenly Demon found himself in an awkward situation. As the difficulty of the game increased, falling out with the Prophet could reduce his chances of surviving the next round. Suddenly, Ryu said, Why are you so nervous? It was a joke, just a joke. Heavenly Demon laughed and said, Eh? So it was. I thought not. Relieved, Heavenly Demon watched Ryu carefully. For Ryu, it was amusing to see Heavenly Demon so careful with every emotion he showed, and he said to himself, It means that my prophecies hold a significant place for Heavenly Demon. Now he can't do without them. Seeing him react to every single emotion was proof that the taming was complete. Ma Kyung-rok, having tasted the prophecy, could no longer escape Ryu's grasp. Ryu said to himself, It's like I've reached the stage where I can control Heavenly Demon at will, and even if the prophecy was a lie, Heavenly Demon would have no choice but to believe it as the absolute truth. To him, the prophecy was his last lifeline. Ryu continued saying to himself, he wouldn't see whether that lifeline was rotten or sturdy. He's that desperate. Then Ryu continued to watch Heavenly Demon, who was still cautious and decided to throw him a bone, and said, I'll give you the information for round 10. Heavenly Demon said happily, Oh, I've been waiting for this. Please. Then Ryu selectively shared the essential tips for conquering round 10, and said, The difficulty increases every 5 rounds. This upcoming round 10, like the previous round 5, will only allow a quarter to survive. Heavenly Demon inquired. Huh, a quarter? Ryu replied, Yes. After round 10, the number of players worldwide will drastically decrease. Although it reduces the number of criminals, it's not good news for Mr. Ma. Heavenly Demon said, That's true. Players are our company's clients, and a reduction in player numbers meant fewer users for the PP market. This was contrary to Heavenly Demon's goal of aiming for a Kospi listing. Ryu added, Don't worry too much. Didn't I tell you to prepare for such times? Heavenly Demon inquired. The VVIP system, Ryu said, upgrade existing members to VVIP and new traders to VIP, change the site's atmosphere from being a free marketplace, make it feel special, enhance the existing benefits, and shift towards an auction-based system to somewhat counter the drop in sales. Additionally, I can also release a large amount of items I've collected to expand the market pool. Heavenly Demon said, Wait a minute, I didn't hear about releasing a large amount of items. Ryu smiled and said, I've gathered quite a lot of items during this time. I've prepared some for you too. Now that it's mentioned, I'll give them to you. Then Ryu pulled out dozens of unique gears from his inventory. Heavenly Demon gulped down his saliva at the sight of such luxurious equipment, and he asked, Where did all this come from? Ryu replied, I made them. I knew the formula because I could see the future. He inquired, And the materials? Ryu said, How else? You've been cutting down criminals day and night, providing materials, haven't you? I made them from those. I had some materials too. In reality, the materials Heavenly Demon provided were nowhere near enough, but he didn't need to know that, nor did he have any interest in knowing. At the moment, Ma Kyung-rok's attention was solely on the unique gears. Then Ryu said, I've prepared everything for Mr. Ma to use, as well as for Mr. An, actress Seo Aaron, and your fiancé. Heavenly Demon said, To go to such lengths, thank you so much. Should I give you gold through the trade feature? Ryu wanted to say, Don't make promises you don't intend to keep, but he restrained himself, and he simply waved his hand with a benevolent smile like Gandhi, and said, Take it all. I want nothing in return. Heavenly Demon said, Oh, thank you so much, Prophet. Though he felt like he had hit the jackpot, He wasn't displeased. At least his gratitude was sincere. After some time, Ryu smiled as he approached Minjuri, who was waving at him from the cafe. And she said, "Min, I've saved you a seat." Ryu said, "It's been a while." "Huh? You already ordered for me?" She smiled and said, "Yes. Double espresso with an extra shot, right?" Ryu smiled and said, "Correct." Now that they met regularly every month, they knew almost everything about each other. Then Ryu said to himself, "But that doesn't mean our relationship should progress." In fact, Ryu knew Minjuri's feelings, but he had no intention of dating in this situation. And he said to himself, "Besides, I've never felt more than friendship for her." However, Minjuri probably felt butterflies every time she saw him. Then Ryu continued saying to himself, "First love is indeed magical, but it's just a crush." Minjuri inquired, "Did you call me here to give me another prophecy, Prophet Nim?" Ryu smiled and said, "What else could it be, Buffer?" The two chuckled and drank their coffee as they conversed. And Ryu said, "The competition will be fierce. Only a quarter will make it, so everyone will be desperate to complete quests during the limited time." Minjuri said, "That sounds intense." Ryu added, "I know a few low-difficulty quests, so memorize them. Prioritizing these can easily get you into the ranks." Ryu took special care to ensure Minjuri could pass through by sharing tips on the upcoming round that she couldn't find anywhere else. Then Minjuri said, "I got it. Really, these tips are priceless." "Thanks." Ryu said, "It's nothing really." She inquired, "Should I give you some gold?" Now that there's a trading feature. Ryu replied, "No need. You sound like that guy." She inquired, "Huh? Who?" Ryu said, "Never mind. Just focus on the round." At that moment, Ryu's phone buzzed. A notification for a news article had popped up. Minjuri inquired, "Huh? What's this?" Ryu replied, "Oh, it's just a notification for an article that came up." Then Ryu feigned surprise as he looked at his smartphone and said, "This is a huge scoop?" Minjuri asked, "What is it?" Ryu said, "Check the news. It's all over it." Curious, Minjuri also checked her phone. She couldn't help but be shocked. The headline read that the leader of KF had committed suicide. Breaking: the leader of KF, Odeon, uploads a suicide video on YouTube. KF leader's suicide? The shocking video causes a stir around the world. A video claiming to be from the KF leader spread rapidly but was taken down after 15 minutes. Despite the provocative headlines, Ryu knew the truth, and he said to himself, "It's a fact without a shred of falsehood." Then Minjuri asked, Min, could this really be true? That the KF leader has died?" Ryu replied, "I don't know." She inquired, "What about a suicide video?" Ryu replied, "I'm curious too, but I can't seem to find it." Then Ryu said to himself, the video that Odeon was directed to upload on YouTube had already been deleted, but it had been exposed for 15 minutes, and with 10,000 clicks during that brief time, its existence was undeniable. Minjuri said, "Look at this. Someone's made a blog post summarizing the situation." As Minjuri said, someone had indeed captured the video and neatly summarized the situation. And the post, up for only 30 minutes, already had over 100 comments. Is this real? KF leader committed suicide? How can we believe that it's really the KF leader? Isn't this just fake news? LOL, did the journalists collectively take drugs? Organized fake news? I live in the US and it's true, it's chaos here. Even CNN is reporting it. Doesn't seem like fake news. Foreign articles are easily searchable on Google. So, it's real? The KF leader committed suicide? Guys, I've checked around and got the video. It's real. A man claiming to be the KF leader says he's in Nigeria, showing proof. Then what was it? He and his followers were all killed by Black Scythe or something. Says he can't face reality anymore, and then slits his throat. Really shocking. Is the above real? But is it true that the KF leader mentioned the Black Scythe before dying? Apparently, Black Scythe killed all his men and organization, and he killed himself because of remorse. LOL, that doesn't make sense. Who's Black Scythe? Am I the only one who doesn't know? The newly appointed deputy commander of the CPF, known among players as a monster due to his strength. If it's true, isn't he a serial killer? They say he killed dozens to hundreds, killing terrorists and still being treated as a murderer, the typical hypocritical South Koreans. It's a crime in Nigeria, so should follow their law. Nigeria would be happy about it. Glad someone exterminated the vermin for them, LOL. Having read the comments, Minjuri resolved to ask Black Scythe herself if she ever met him in the other world, whether this news article claiming KF has been eradicated was true or not. Ryu also said to himself, "It's happening. Some people are skeptical, but time will reveal the whole truth. And just looking at the immigration records and the evidence in Nigeria, it will be clear." While Minjuri was in the bathroom, Ryu's phone was ringing off the hook. Ryu peeked at his phone to find dozens of missed calls and messages. As expected, there were requests for interviews. Ryu said to himself, "Good thing I had it on silent, or Minjuri would have caught me." Ryu continued saying, "It was a good move to have Odeon record a suicide video instead of just killing him. And FBI and Interpol wouldn't be unaware of Odeon's face. Moreover, the evidence he left will quickly confirm his identity as the boss of KF. Eventually, a proper announcement and articles would appear from both the U.S. and Nigerian governments, and the whole world would know that Black Scythe had dismantled the KF organization. When Minjuri come back, she said, "Black Scythe is amazing. When did he go abroad to do this?" Ryu said, "Yeah, really." Then she asked, "Min, didn't you know about this, since you can see the future?" Ryu replied, "I didn't know. The future isn't something I can see whenever I want." Minjuri said, "Ah, I see," and she left it at that. After all, being a prophet is a great excuse. Despite the uproar about the eradication of KF, time continued to pass. October 1st, midnight. Approximately 2,700 players had gathered. These were the last remaining players in South Korea. Ryu said, "After today, only 25% of them will survive." It was a dire situation, but even Ryu couldn't change the system's laws. And he added, "If I can't save everyone, I'd better save those who can be useful to me." And those useful individuals approached Ryu. Minjuri, Ma Kyung-rok, An Sang-cheol, Seo Arin, Heo Tae-seok, Jo Yong-ho, and Yam-ti were among them. As they found each other in search of Black Scythe, they exchanged wary glances, and they said to themselves, "Why are there so many people here? Did everyone come to talk to Black Scythe? Why are they sticking to Black Scythe? Hoping to get some scraps?" Although they harbored negative feelings towards each other, no one showed it openly. It was not the place to show an unsightly side in front of an absolute figure like Black Scythe. Then they said, "Hello, Black Scythe. Hello. Hello." While they rushed to greet him, Ryu did not respond to anyone, but these were all indispensable forces for Ryu. So he asked everyone, "What brings you all to me?" Minjuri was the first to ask. "I heard that you annihilated KF. I wanted to verify if it's true." Ryu said it is. With a straightforward acknowledgement, everyone looked at him in amazement. Then Minjuri inquired, "Really? You destroyed KF?" The usually shy aged man Noge spoke exaggeratedly. "Truly, Black Scythe, you are indeed the deputy commander of the CPF. And going to another country and working towards world peace, I'm impressed." Reading his thoughts, it seemed like an attempt to draw attention. So Ryu asked him, "Got something to say to me?" Aged man Noge replied, "Ah, yes, exactly, Black Scythe. It's not something I should share here, but I wanted to inform you that I've started a cult." Ryu inquired, "A cult? Whom does it worship?" Slowly spreading his arms, aged man Noge then dramatically pointed at one person, none other than Ryu, and he said, "A cult that venerates Black Scythe as a god." Ryu said, "I'm not a god, though." He said, "That's up to people to decide. In our death god cult, Black Scythe is a god." Ryu inquired, "Death god cult?" The name was somewhat cringeworthy, but aged man Noge appeared quite proud of it, and said, "Yes, isn't it cool? Death god cult. We've already gathered 6 followers. Of course, I'm the high priest. Here is Archbishop Aom Jun-seok, who appeared out of nowhere next to aged man Noge, seemed embarrassed by his title, unable to raise his head. Then aged man Noge added, "If anyone is interested, please join our death god cult. We welcome anyone who loves Black Scythe with open arms." In the midst of this unexpected event, Ryu was about to say something but stopped, as some players seemed interested after all, and he asked himself, Minjuri, Seo Arin, Yamti, and even Jo Yong-ho, although they did not show it, they seemed eager to join the Death God cult. But suddenly, another group had arrived in search of Black Scythe. These were CPF squad members Ryu had seen in reality. Of course, their customized faces were different, but he recognized them by their nicknames. They said, "Commander, we're disappointed. You went to Nigeria alone. If you were going to hunt down those KF vermin, you should have taken us too." Their tone was playful, But Ryu responded seriously, "You need to protect Korea. Where are you planning to go?" One said, "Please share some of the glorious stories of taking down KF with us." Another said, "Hey, do you think it was that easy? There are hundreds of suspected KF players." Another said, "That's right. You'd just be in the way if you're not up to my level." He said, "Bullshit. You're not even as skilled as I am." Another said, "Hey, I've dealt with more criminals than you have." One said, "Everyone stop. None of us can handle hundreds of KF members. It's impossible without the commander." Nodding in agreement, the squad members' conversation continued while Ryu secretly sighed. And he said to himself, how did it get so busy around here? In fact, in the previous regressions, he had been a loner, surviving and acting solely for his own benefit. Yet now, suddenly, there were so many people around him, and it won't be like before when we ran out of manpower and everyone disappeared. Of course, that's assuming he successfully leads the people around him through the 20 rounds ahead. Just then, a being with wings unfolded in the sky appeared and said, "Hello, humans. I'm the Angel Nell, in charge of guiding you in the 10th round. I'll explain the round to you, so please pay attention. You wouldn't want your heads to explode, would you?" Then, with a creepy statement, the angel smiled and addressed everyone. "First, congratulations on reaching the 10th round. It's heartwarming that you've made it this far. Impressive. But today, it would be wise to shed any arrogance. Only a quarter will survive this tough round." One player inquired, "What? Only a quarter?" And the players were visibly frightened as Nell smirked. Then Angel said, "Scared, are we? Well, let's look at the next round's details then." Then a system message appeared. Round 10, Main Quest. Complete at least one sub-quest within 10 hours in the other world. Subquests, multiple, all areas. Participants, 550,528. Achievers, 0 out of 137,632. Specific area C3ESKA001. Participants, 2,760. Achievers, 0 out of 690. Players tense up upon reviewing the quests. And one inquired, "Complete at least one subquest in the other world we visited before?" Another inquired, "Given that it says more than one, there must be several available, so completing just one out of many counts as completing the quest?" One said, "Then isn't that too easy?" Such thoughts of ease were fleeting, and the players quickly corrected their thoughts. And one said, "It can't be this easy, especially since the angel had made it sound challenging. So, each sub-quest must be incredibly difficult then." At that moment, Angel Nell let out a laughter that bordered on scorn, and said, "The sub-quests aren't difficult, humans. While there are variations in difficulty, most are easy enough to tackle alone. Don't be too scared." One inquired, "Then what part is supposed to be difficult?" The angel replied, "What I meant wasn't that the quest itself is hard. Passing the round won't be easy because the achievers' positions will be filled based on who completes the most quests." Hearing that, people started to wonder how many quests they could finish. Such a statement was nothing short of instigating competition. But no one knew how many would need to be completed to be safe. Of course, not everyone was in the dark. At least those who had heard Ryu's prophecy were not visibly anxious. The prophecy was as follows: you need to complete at least 4 subquests to be in the top 25%. To be within the top 3 in this area, you need 7. But Ryu intended to complete 10 quests this round, as to be sure of securing first place. Completing 10 quests was considered safe. Then the angel said, "You might have guessed, but let me explain. This round allows you to roam freely in the other world for 10 hours, finishing subquests located in various places. As you can see, completing at least one subquest counts as succeeding in the main quest, and you can complete as many more as you like until time is up." One player said, "10 hours is quite a long mission, isn't it?" The angel added, "You need to keep moving. While there's a 10-hour limit, your passage will depend on how many quests you complete. Make sure to complete at least one. Of course, if you don't complete any, you'll simply vanish." One player said, "This is going to be fierce, huh? We'll have to tackle the quests intensely." Another said, "There's a time limit, but no limit on how many quests can be achieved." Ryu said to himself, "Naturally, competition was inevitable, and you'd feel anxious not knowing how many quests you need to complete. It will be stressful and tough. But tough is different from difficult." Ryu added, just as the angel said, There are easy quests, but only about 1 in 10 is easy, and 5 out of 10 are difficult to complete alone, and the rest can barely be completed. In fact, the angel's claim of ease was a lie, as managing to complete 4 in 10 hours is actually impressive, given the player's current level. Ryu wasn't worried about the difficulty, and he said to himself, it's a walk in the park compared to the Tower of Trials, and completing 10 sub-quests in 10 hours might even be easier than breaking through the 60th floor of the Tower of Trials. Then the angel said, once you've completed a quest, you can't retry it. Of course, other players can attempt it, though. Just so you know and plan accordingly. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. One player boldly raised his hand with the question and asked, can you tell us the difficulty level of each quest? But the response was dismissive. As the angel said, that's such a foolish first question. Makes me want to explode your head. It wouldn't be fun if I told you that. Any other questions, human? Another inquired. Can we give up on a quest if it gets too hard during the progress? The angel replied, a good question. You can give up. There's a quit button in the quest progress window. Just press that, and you can retry as long as you haven't succeeded in the quest yet. Another smiled and said, if a quest is too hard, we can just give up. The angel added, but keep in mind, we won't give you back your time, and you can only quit once per quest. You only get one chance to retry the same quest. Hearing that, players who had thought they could try multiple times stopped in their tracks. Then the angel smiled and said, now that the briefing is over, let's proceed with the round. As Nell spread her wings, the same message appeared before everyone. Please touch the area you wish to start in. 1. Albit's Kingdom. 2. Bram Kingdom. 3. The Holy Empire. 4. Elsorium. If you do not choose within the time limit, a random selection will be made. Time remaining until selection ends. 0:0:0:0:59. Players were flustered by the sudden prompt to choose a starting region, yet not everyone was flustered, as Ryu's group, who had been forewarned through a prophecy, was composed. In fact, 1, 2, and 3 are human cities, and 4 is an elf city. And given Ryu's favorable reputation among the elves, he would receive great treatment if he went to Elsorium, but he excluded option 4, and he said to himself, it's not time yet. There will be plenty of opportunities to meet the elves later. Above all, Ryu's focus was elsewhere in this round, not on the sub-quests, and he said to himself, I'm going to the Holy Empire, number 3. But before selecting, Ryu looked at Minjuri. He wanted a buff, and she was already hastily distributing them among the people. Then Minjuri said, get your buffs before we leave. Black Scythe, you too. Ryu said, thank you. I don't know where everyone will be, but let's all do our best. Still, Minjuri was distributing buffs and cheering, having become somewhat acquainted. And she said, shall we go then? Ryu's finger tapped the air. In fact, the fantasy continent has 5 kingdoms and 1 empire. Of these, 2 kingdoms are Albit's and Bram, previously mentioned. The rest are minor kingdoms, not even considered starting points. After moving to the Holy Empire, Ryu saw walls so tall they could make one dizzy and numerous buildings and temples within, bustling with activity. It was almost too lifelike to distinguish from reality. And he said, it's not called an empire for nothing, and I've turned hostile here after killing the Archbishop in round 8. But there's no worry if I don't show my title. If he did, the guards would try to arrest him. And he added, if they arrest me, it's the least of it. They might just kill me on the spot. But our Ryu wouldn't just die to such trash, though he found the nuisance of flies bothersome. That's why he avoided showing his title. As Ryu looked around, he noticed people in familiar attire. They were players, and whether it was a feature of being in the fantasy world or not, their nicknames were not visible. Ryu said, good that nicknames aren't visible. It's easier to act alone. Then Ryu transformed into a lost yak in a secluded spot, just in case he ran into someone he knew. After that, the system message appeared. Starting location, the Holy Empire. Ongoing subquests, none. Completed subquests, none. Time remaining until round ends, 0:9:58:21. The quest progress window indicated that time was ticking away, and the real round was beginning. Ordinarily, one might rush about seeking quests, but Ryu was relaxed. He was confident he could easily achieve the 10 quests, and he said, right now, sub-quests aren't what's important. Then Ryu's steps led him to the central square of the Holy Empire. He waited by a statue engraved with angels, soon to meet a familiar face who said, Master. Yamti, who knew the face of Lost Yak, ran up and said, sorry, it's so big here I needed to know where the central square was. Ryu said, you could have simply asked a guard. She inquired, "Oh, would they have answered?" Ryu replied, "They would, unless your reputation is hostile." In fact, Ryu had arranged to meet Yamti here in the Holy Empire, not for any trivial reason, but because her charm skill was needed to enter the temple. Then he said, "Let's go." Yamti inquired, "Where to?" Ryu replied, "The temple." She inquired, "Why the temple?" Ryu said coldly, "You ask too many questions." Yamti looked down, dejected, and said, "Sorry." Being a slave who executed orders without question, Ryu hadn't felt the need to explain, but it seemed right to at least tell her their purpose. And he said, "There's only one reason why you're here." Yamti inquired, "Because you need me to charm someone?" Ryu said, "Right. The largest temple in the Holy Empire has an altar where oracles are given. Normally it's not accessible to just anyone, but with the rune of charm, it's a different story." She said, "Oh, so you need me to get to the altar where the oracle is given?" Ryu said, "That's right." Yamti said, "But can NPCs be charmed too? I've never tried it." Ryu said, "They can." And Ryu said to himself, "And not just that. Thoughts can be read too, like they're real people. And they might even be real people, existing in another dimension, just like us." But Ryu couldn't dismiss the assumption they were NPCs, and he said to himself, what if each entity is an AI whose thoughts are well-programmed? It can be seen as a virtual human or NPC created for this game, and if they can transfer 1.8 billion human souls to the other world, they must have the technology to create such AI. Thus, Ryu stopped speculating. He acted solely for growth and survival up to round 20. Then Yamti asked, "But what are we going to do at the altar with the oracle?" Ryu Min's lips